Welcome back to The Bible is Art, where we explore the literary artistry of the Bible, and this week we're looking at the art of Ananias and Sapphira. By the time we get to the story of Ananias and Sapphira in the book of Acts, the Spirit has descended on the church at Pentecost like the hovering, creating Spirit in Genesis 1, and the church is expanding. There has been external conflict, but this is the first scene of internal conflict that Luke shows us. Here's Acts 5, the first two verses. But a man named Ananias with his wife Sapphira sold a piece of property, and with his wife's knowledge he kept back for himself some of the proceeds and brought only part of it and laid it at the apostles' feet. Just like Adam and Eve's vying for knowledge in the beginning with Sapphira's knowledge, he takes what is not his. Ananias had sold property for the church, but brought only part of the money to the apostles. And now, for the first time in our scene, a character speaks, verses 3 and 4. But Peter said, Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back for yourself part of the proceeds of the land? While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not at your disposal? Why is it that you have contrived this deed in your heart? You have not lied to man, but to God. Peter addresses Ananias and tells us that Ananias' action was not a minor fib, but the work of Satan, the only action of Satan in the book of Acts. And this satanic-inspired action was to lie to the Holy Spirit. A few verses before our story, Luke tells us that the church had one heart, in contrast to Ananias' heart that's filled with deceit. The Spirit filled the heart of the church, while Satan has filled Ananias' heart. Peter asks 5 questions of Ananias to which he has no response. Peter indicates that this was a lie to God and the Holy Spirit, and it is here that we uncover the nature of the evil. It was not that Ananias had property or money, but that he lied to God. And if we make explicit what is implicit, Ananias had committed to giving this property to God, but then lied and kept part for himself. Here are the next 2 verses. When Ananias heard these words, he fell down and breathed his last. And great fear came upon all who heard of it. The young men rose and wrapped him up and carried him out and buried him. Now, this story is included not only to give us a moral lesson about honesty. You see, if this story sounds familiar, then you have good Bible senses. This story is very similar to the story of Achan and the Battle of Ai in the book of Joshua, and that is intentional. This story alludes to that story. The story of Achan was about the conquest of the land God had given them, and our text is as well. But notice that the conquest has a different character. Here, the land is given away from one brother to another. The reason this story alludes to the story of Achan is to tell us that this little church is the new Israel and has a new conquest. And God is still the same holy God. The next verses. After an interval of about 3 hours, his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. And Peter said to her, "Tell me whether you sold the land for so much." And she said, "Yes, for so much." But Peter said to her, "How is it that you have agreed together to test the Spirit of the Lord? Behold, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out." Immediately she fell down at his feet and breathed her last. When the young men came in, they found her dead, and they carried her out and buried her beside her husband. Luke decided to tell the story of Ananias and Sapphira in 2 parts. First Ananias and then Sapphira. Why? Why not tell them together? They're pretty much the same. So Luke could have said Ananias and Sapphira lied to the Holy Spirit and they both died. But he tells them separately. Why? Well, if you remember just a few verses before our passage, that the church had one heart and soul and had everything in common. Ananias and Sapphira are the opposite. They are divided. Luke has separated their stories because they themselves are separated. Their deception has divided them. Notice, Luke told us that Sapphira had knowledge of what her husband was doing, but she had no knowledge of his death. Their deception has separated them from God, their property, and each other. And with a dark note, Luke tells us that they are buried together when unity no longer matters. Because they refuse to lay the money at the feet of the apostles, they themselves will lay at their feet. And interestingly, the same word that was used twice for bringing the money to the apostles is used when Ananias and Sapphira are brought out dead. Indeed, they are the wealth that should have been laid at the feet. Ananias' name means God has favored, and Sapphira means sapphire. And so this wealthy couple unwillingly lays their wealth themselves at the feet of the apostles. And that, my friends, is why the Bible is art. Thank you everyone so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. Do all the things you do on videos. That would be great. If you'd like to support the channel, that would be great as well. You can go to patreon.com/thebibleisart, and I'll see you later.